Hello, and welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects. This is a podcast where we discuss directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. We are currently delving into the whimsical world of Wes Anderson and the fantastical world of Guillermo del Toro. Today, I have a very special guest. If you have seen some of our late shows, he had a wild theory about the plot of My Girl, or what he thought My Girl was about. But now he's on the official show to talk about the Saturday morning cartoon fueled energy of Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim. Nick Bell, welcome back and glad
Hi,
to
it's
have
great to
you.
be back. Uh,
So, my first question is: are you a fan of Guillermo del Toro?
I do like a lot of his movies. I wouldn't call myself a fan, but I do know that he does make some. He is very. He has a. He's a very imaginative filmmaker, and we definitely need a lot more of those. He um, he actually cares about the product he puts out, and which we'll get to later on in this episode. And um, and all in all around, when you look at him, he's just another geek. Just like when it all comes down to it, he's just like us, and that's really what I like about his movies.
And it's not just what he likes in movies. That's just like him in general. Like if you've ever listened to him or seen him in interviews, like he's always nerding out about certain monster movies or any kind of genre that he likes. Like he's just like nerding out all the time.
Well, yeah, when you also look at his movies, those movies are love letters to said monster movies. But really, there a lot of them are usually about something deeper, especially with movies like Pan's Labyrinth um, and The Shape of Water. I'm sure you'll cover those if you haven't already. But a lot of that is who is the real monster in that movie.
So the movie we're talking about today is a little more straightforward of a movie than some of his other films. But
Very much.
why do you love Pacific Rim or wanted to talk about it?
Well, that's actually why I love Pacific Rim. I do like a lot of the deeper movies, but sometimes you just want to have fun. And Pacific Rim is a fun movie.
Yes, it is. And this is probably the closest of me watching a movie and then recording an episode. I watched this movie this morning because I was busy yesterday. So
Hmm.
it's like, I think we're record. If I get up early enough, I can watch it before we record. And so you said Saturday morning. So I sat down with a bowl of cereal and watched Pacific Rim this morning.
Nice. I just got myself a breakfast burrito.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
what I love is that he for one, when this movie came out, I remember a lot of the reviews were like, people need to go see this movie because it's a big budget original studio movie made by a visionary director. It's not based on any previous material, not a comic book, it's not a sequel or a remake. It's just untapped original format. Of course, he's playing heavily into influences of kaiju movies, particularly like the monster movies of Ray Harryhausen and the Godzilla movies
yeah. Like it
and
goes back to that.
anime.
Goes back to that, love letter to the monster movies that he watched. And yeah, it is an original franchise. It's not based on anything, but when you first watch it, it feels like it should have been based on something, because the first few shots of those, seeing the Jaegers power up, and just hearing that opening thing, dun, 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 it it feels like a living comic book, honestly. And
It,
funny say it's not. I mean, the screenwriter, I forget his name at the moment, but the screenwriter actually wrote a prequel comic which
Oh,
details the first few days of the kaiju war and the building of the Jaegers.
I believe his name is Travis Beecham. I could be
Yes,
wrong.
yes, that's him.
But I love the story of how he came up with this movie. Apparently, he went for a walk in California on the beach. I think it is near San Francisco. I could be wrong on the location, but he went
Yeah.
for a walk and he saw like it was a cloudy morning and he said he saw an image that just looked like a giant robot and he was like, that would be a cool movie.
Well, yeah. Like, I mean, it feels like at this point, giant robots mm, are kind of no brainers at this point, with with all of the anime that's come out since what, the 70s, and
Mhm.
uh, and of course the success of the Michael Bay Transformers movies, love or hate them as you will. Personally, I'm more of a fan of Bumblebee, but
I
though
need to
either
see that. Everybody tells me that one's actually good.
yes, it to me it is the best of all of the Transformers movies, and it really gets to the heart of what Transformers is, and um, as as good as a visual filmmaker Michael Bay is, a lot of it gets feels like his movies are the U.S. military is really awesome with special guest stars, the Transformers.
Right, they don't really feel like Transformers movies to me at all. And I think where Del Toro is definitely a more skilled filmmaker is if Del Toro was given a script that was maybe not up to snuff, I feel like his ability as a filmmaker and a storyteller, he could elevate it. Whereas I think Michael Bay's like, however the script is, that's how the movie's going to be, no matter how good the special effects are.
Hills, of course, I'm pretty sure um, he'll fix some stuff here and there. Del Toro's like that. I'm not sure. Have you seen any of the behind the scenes footage of that? Because there's a moment where Del Toro is talking with the special effects people, and like there's this moment where he wanted where he was talking about either it's like the flaps of the wings from the kaiju, and it's like he wanted a certain body part to have more weight. Like um, he wanted it to make it as realistic as possible. He was actually talking about what the anatomy would of the kaiju would be, and it goes back to how much he cares as a filmmaker.
Yes, yes, and he wants everything to be as good and as detailed as possible. And what I found interesting was that he almost didn't make this movie with when Beecham approached him to direct it because he was in the process of trying to make his long, long passion project, At the Mountains of Madness, the adaptation of the H.P. Lovecraft story.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard of the production hell surrounding that. I think James Cameron was tapped to direct a while back.
He was going to produce it, and it was going to
Oh, okay.
start and it was going to star Tom Cruise. And this is right after Cameron did Avatar, so it's kind of wild that. But they didn't want to. I think it was going to be $150 million budget. Del Toro wouldn't budge on the cost, and he said it had to be rated R. And they didn't want
Yeah.
to take it. They didn't want to take a chance on 150 million R-rated movie, even with Tom Cruise and James Cameron's involvement.
Yeah, yeah. Um I feel directors should be able to make the kinds of movies they want to make. Um, I mean, yeah, it movies are a gamble for studio producers, but when you have uh, when you have names, when you have really heavy hitter names behind it, you know there's gonna be some quality. So I think um, I think this falls under missed opportunity in that aspect.
And this is a big gap between this film and Hellboy 2, which he hadn't experienced since early on in his career when he had the struggles of trying to make money back after doing Kronos and then the production nightmare that Mimic was between that and The Devil's Backbone. But part of that is because he spent a year in New Zealand developing The Hobbit and then for financial rights reasons. And then I think creative differences between him and Peter Jackson, he left the project.
Yeah, yeah. The actually, you I forgot Del Toro made Mimic. I actually saw that one in the theater.
Oh
I think,
wow.
yeah, I think I was in high school when that movie came out.
Yeah, we've been talking through this series. I was like, that's the first Del Toro movie I saw, but I didn't know who Del Toro was till around the time Blade 2 and Hellboy came out.
Oh yeah, and the Hellboy movies. Those, I mean, um, I know in the original comics, Hellboy and Liz have a um, have a more platonic relationship, but the movie actually felt more like the comics than the new one with David Harbour. No offense to David Harbour at all. He is a fantastic actor. I love him in Stranger Things. I'm really looking forward to season 4, and I still haven't seen Black Widow yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing that one as well.
Well, him, Rachel Weisz, and Florence Pugh, in my opinion, all make the movie, which are the supporting cast of like this kind of family that they sort of bond in that film. Like those three actors really make the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. Um, but going back to Pacific Rim, it was, yeah, you're going talking about what who makes the films. All the actors in this movie make the films, and a lot of those are mostly unknowns. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, except well, Idris Elba was starting to come into his own as a film star and an action star. It was, but all everyone else, just were either stars in their own country or just relative newcomers to the scene, but everyone bought something to that movie, and that's one of the many, many, many things that make it work.
Yeah, speaking of Idris Elba, the man is a extremely talented actor, one of our best actors working today. But he knows exactly what kind of movie he's in. But even though he
Yeah.
knows the type of movie, he's still giving it that gravitas and amazing performance. Like I don't know how many actors that you would take when he gives his that rousing speech and he's like, "We are canceling the apocalypse." Like I don't know how many
Yes.
actors could believably do that where you're not laughing. But
Christopher Lee,
yeah.
like, um, yeah, you have Christopher Lee. I would almost say Denzel Washington, but I think that might be a too silly a project for Denzel Washington. But he's going to be one of those actors where no matter how bad or silly the movie is, he's going to be awesome in it. Because another movie with Idris Elba that comes to mind where he over the top was Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw,
Hmm.
where I'm Black Superman.
Yeah. I think he's the best part of that movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, first of all, the villain has to be the most interesting character, and he brought the most depth to to that character. And the I want to say sometime around part seven was when the franchise stopped taking itself seriously. It has this feel of the screenwriters just put a bunch of Hot Wheels in front of a bunch of kids, watched how they played, and then they built a screenplay around that.
That tracks. That tracks, especially with this most recent one.
Fast and the Furious in space.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this one actually, it doesn't it doesn't have that feel. Pacific Rim doesn't have that feel exactly like, oh, we're just gonna take, but it feels like uh, a man's version of how he used to play with robot toys and monster toys as a kid. This is the uh, this is what we realize what was going on in our minds when that was happening.
Yeah. It feels like Del Toro and the screenwriter were like, let's just make a movie out of how we played with our toys as a kid and just bring it to life.
Yes, yes, and um, well, also, the story. It was a very all the characters are well developed. I'm sure you've heard how this movie has spawned the what they call the Mako Mori test.
Hmm. Go into
Yeah, after
detail,
okay, after well, it's also named after the character Mako Mori,
of
played but
course.
um I don't want to butcher the actress's name, but she brought a lot to that character. But the idea behind the test is, can the would the plot make as much sense if you remove the male lead and kept the female lead?
Hmm.
Uh, as to the quality of the movie, as opposed to what you probably know as the Bechtel test, is, can
Hmm.
two women just having a conversation about a man. And uh, I and I get what they were trying to do with that test, as a call out to, please have more well-rounded female characters in movies. But just using that test as a benchmark of quality in a movie alone um, is isn't enough, honestly. I mean, movies like the Bikini Car Wash Company, Lifetime movies, they pass Bechdel. Hallmark, um, the Hallmark holiday movies pass Bechdel, but I would not call any of those movies good
Yes, those
or
certainly
feminist.
right. Yeah, those are certainly a genre of particular taste. But yeah, talking about this movie, they could, and no disrespect to Charlie Hunnam, I mean, he's doing what's required of him in this movie, and yeah, he's not up to snuff of category as some of these other actors that are in the movie, but he does what's required. But yeah, they totally could have not had his character in this movie and just had Mako as the main character, and it would
But
have worked.
but yeah, that's the thing. He and Marco, they actually have complete arcs. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, Raleigh's getting over the death of his brother, and Mako wants to prove herself, and you know, and they immediately. I kind of wish they did a little bit more with the bridging um,
Hmm.
scenes, instead of uh, having it done mid battle. Um, just left a little bit more time to breathe, instead of wanting to getting to the next monster fight. But what they did was with that is pretty good, in my opinion.
I think they do have good chemistry, and I think it works with the plot because you got to have the two pilots, and they have to. They call it drift, but they have to be like compatible to be. They have to have chemistry, so to speak, to work together.
Yeah. And yeah, Charlie Hunnam and Rinko Kikuchi, they really bought the uh, um, they really, brought it to the table. And, also one of the things I kind of wish they left in the movie, in the prequel comic that, uh, sorry, that Travis Beecham wrote. Uh, One thing he mentioned is the side effect of being in the drift is you start to have a small telepathic bond.
Yeah, they hint at that a little bit in the movie with the different pilots, like being able to see each other's memories and like read their minds without even like just knowing what they're thinking because they've bonded,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
he
great
goes.
in that. Oh,
Yeah, he
sorry.
yeah, yeah, he goes more into that in the prequel comics. And if anyone picks if anyone picks that up, if anyone sees it in a comic book store, I would heartily recommend it. I think I managed to get it on a discount at a budget bin, but it was, one of the best comic purchases I've made.
Awesome. I think they advertise it on my Blu-ray disc
Yeah,
when I was watching the movie today. And it's like Year Zero or something it's called.
yeah, Tales from Year Zero,
Yeah. But talking about the telepathat darn it,
telepathy.
telepathy that the pilots share. I love that scene where Idris Elba decides to get back in the Jaeger, even though he's suffered heavy side effects from being in it from the radiation, and
Yeah,
the jerk Australian that's guess kind of Charlie Hunneman's rival or is threatened by Charlie Hunneman when he's like, well, how are we even gonna know we can link up? He's like, I don't need to read your mind. I know what's going on in your head. I was like, oh, he just burned you.
well, actually, my favorite Idris Elba line was one, "Don't ever touch me again." Two, "Don't ever touch me again."
Yeah. And speaking of Mako, there's a really sweet, touching story about the making of this movie. And a guest on my Devil's Backbone episode, Brandon Stanwyck, brought it up, and I loved it. So the young actress that plays Mako in the flashback of how she met, which Idris Elba may have one of the coolest movie names in history, Stacker Pentecost or whatever it's called.
Yes, yes, Stacker Pentecost.
And the flashback of, I guess, her family, the kaiju invading where she's from, and her family being killed, and her meeting him, and him kind of becoming her surrogate father, so to speak. The young actress that plays her had a hard time pronouncing Guillermo. Like, there's something with the pronunciation of that
Oh
name.
yes, I know this story. Yeah, it's like she couldn't say Guillermo del Toro, and that's also because in the Japanese language the R's and L sounds are switched up.
So apparently, she was a fan of Ghibli and Miyazaki films, as is Del Toro. And he said, "You can call me," because they both love My Neighbor Totoro. Apparently, he said, "You could call me Totoro-san," and so she called
Yes,
him
I know.
Totoro-san on set, which I just found so sweet.
Yes, I love that story. I mean, that's which also is a testament to how well Del Toro works with children, um,
Hmm.
especially like young actresses. There was one actress from Pan's Labyrinth. which, yeah, she pretty much had to carry that whole movie, and she did a great job with that.
Yeah, I love that about his films. He's able to like capture the imagination and thought process of a child, but it's like a realistic portrayal of a child. It's not that typical Hollywood, well, this is how a kid acts and they say these things because it's cute and funny. No, he gives a realistic portrayal of childhood.
Yeah, yeah, and well, be, being a teacher myself, I respect anybody who can, uh, work well with children.
Yeah, and I think part of that is besides I love that he let her call him Totoro. I think he has a lot of Totoro energy, just not just how he looks physically. No, not body shaming Mr. Del Toro, but just like he seems like a jovial, friendly person when you
Yes,
listen to him that has a lot of love. That's kind of what I mean for the Totoro feeling.
yes. Also, going speaking of chemistry between going back to chemistry between actors, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Charlie Day and Bern Gorman, the
Yep.
chemistry they had together as the kaiju scientists.
Yes, they are both amazing and hilarious, and these are two other actors besides Idris Elba who know exactly what kind of movie they're in and what kind of performance they need to be giving.
Yes, yes. We I will be honest, I have not seen the sequels. I have not seen the Netflix series. I was disappointed that many of the actors didn't return. Well, actually, Del Toro didn't even return for the sequel, so I
Hmm.
think not that's not good.
I have not seen it either, and I know that it was only made because of the international success of this film, because sadly, this film did not do well domestically, but
Oh,
it like
it did well. It just didn't do number one. Like it was definitely a top five contender. But the way Hollywood works now is almost like Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you last.
yeah, and you got to make that great opening weekend. If you don't have a good opening weekend, unless there's every once in a while, there's a movie that gets really good word of mouth and like slowly builds. But we're so short term memory now with movies. Like once you have your opening weekend, that's like your make or break. But yeah, this movie did amazing internationally, and that's how it kind of made its budget back was its international success.
Yeah, I to detour a little bit. This kind of makes me uh, um, wish. It's like this is probably one of the few times where I'll wish for the old days over because you know growing up movies would be in the theaters for weeks, like sometimes months on end, and just basically they'd leave the theater when their popularity would wane. So uh yeah, and it goes back to what you said. Sometimes it wouldn't do so hot in its opening week, but then it would build up and more people would see it and more people would see it, it and then the movie ends up either becoming a cult classic or eventually a hit.
Hmm. That's another thing that's kind of hurt movies now is because even when a movie, let's say like most of John Carpenter's work from besides Halloween up until the mid 90s, most of his
Yeah,
films were not financially successful, but they found a life on home video or on cable. And that's almost impossible now. Very rarely are there movies. You just have some people like going to bat for certain films now, trying to get people to be like, no, you should check this movie out. But it's kind of hard even now for a movie to get like cult status because we don't have that way of how we consume media now. Like, yeah, we might rent it or we might watch it if it streams somewhere, but sometimes movies get lost to the sands of time because it didn't get that opening weekend or that awards talk or something where someone's like, "Yeah, you should check this movie out." So,
It is a bit of a shame, but yeah, you're right. The way we consume media now is way different than say 1991. Like if you
oh
told
yeah.
I like honestly the whole streaming being able to watch multiple things at the same time, I call that one of the things Back to the Future 2 got right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's wild and why I kind of like that there's a shorter theatrical window for some movies because one, you can't possibly see everything unless it's your job
Yeah.
and you're and two, it's kind of expensive to go to the movies, so it's kind of nice that like there's a 45-day window and then it's released digitally. But I feel like it hurts especially with filmmakers like Del Toro and other people who are trying to make more original and interesting films. And look, I like all the Marvel movies. I'm part of the problem probably of perpetuating, but there should be a nice medium where we can have both. You know, it shouldn't be where we get one or the other.
Yeah, it's as much as I am a fan of the Marvel movies and Marvel comics in general, and the same with DC comics. Uh, I'd like to see I'd like to see more risk myself. I'd like to see some. Well, there. I mean, there are original productions. There's that one movie, Gunpowder Milkshake, that I haven't seen it yet, but it's on my list. Um, and Even now, I'll just one of the things I used to do back when I was living in Nacogdoches was I would sometimes just go to Hastings. I'd look up um, movies. I go to Hastings and look at their movie selection, see what they have, and I'd pick a movie at random and just check it out, not knowing whether it's good or bad, and just roll the dice. And I sometimes do that now with what's on um, Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus. Like I finally watched Hocus Pocus for the first time this past Halloween.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I had no idea that the kid from Erie, Indiana, was the main kid in Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, I find it odd that our generation has turned this movie into like a Halloween tradition because this movie was not talk about things that was not really popular. Like I think that was not a financial success for Disney and I don't think it was reviewed very well, but people I guess watched it as a kid like all the time or like every Halloween and it's become like a Halloween staple so much that they're now making a sequel to it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. It kind of goes back to what you said. Yeah, it might not be financially successful, but as time goes on, it finds its audience and it becomes a cult status. Another movie that actually going another speaking of Disney, another movie that comes to mind that did the same thing was Robin Hood.
Mhm.
Yeah, Disney's Robin Hood, and that was one of my cherished video rentals when I was a kid. And watching it now as an adult, it's still fine. It's still a decent movie. It's not great by any any stretch of the imagination, but I can see it's like I can still see why kid me, love this movie so much.
Yeah, I'm discovering because it was on a videotape I had recorded of a bunch of other stuff that I used to watch all the time. It had the Big Bird movie and Mickey Mouse's Christmas Carol and something else, and I'd watch it all the time. But I'm discovering, and it's people of varied ages, that Disney's Robin Hood is like some sort of foundational film for them as a young person.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. Among some Disney fans, there is a fan theory that Nick Wilde from Zootopia is a descendant of Disney's Robin Hood.
Of course, there's always somebody trying to make everything connected.
Yeah, ever since, yeah, the whole shared universe thing, that is, oh, there we go. Yeah, the shared universe concept, it's ever since Marvel perfected it, they've been kind of wanting to do more of that. Of course, there. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the Tommy Westfall hypothesis, right?
Go into detail. I might have, but I didn't know the name of that.
Okay, it starts. Okay, it all starts with the final episode of Saint Elsewhere, um, which I
Okay,
want to
I
say
know that
aired
show.
back in 1988. It's basically the show that launched Denzel Washington's career,
Yes, yeah, I knew
and
that.
the final episode is this reveal that the entire show takes place in a mind of this young non-responsive boy. I mean, we realize it's high autism, but this young boy named Tommy Westfall, the whole show took place in his imagination.
Hmm.
Of course, a lot of people thought, "Oh, that's such a cop out. That's such, like, how who would come up with something like that?" And then years later, Homicide: Life on the Street came out, and
Hmm.
one of the characters from and the actress who played her, she reprises her role. One of the characters from Saint Elsewhere is on that show, and of course, that show has John Munch, played by um,
Richard Richard
Richard Belzer.
Belzer.
Richard
Yeah.
Belzer, yeah, and he ends up in all these different shows.
Hmm. Yeah, he was on one of the Law and Orders for a while.
He was on Law and Order SVU. He actually, and then all the Law and Orders crossed over together. And they're in that universe, and he was on Arrested Development. He was uh, the yeah Arrested Development. Yeah, he was even on freaking Sesame Street.
Yeah, he's made a career out of playing that guy, which is probably just a version of himself.
Pretty much, like it's almost like that. Yeah, just giving him an excuse to do his stand up on TV. But yeah, he current Richard Belzer currently holds the world record for the most times his character has appeared on different shows.
Hmm.
So so the theory, which was also it was coined by comic book the late great Dwayne McDuffie.
Mm.
He created Static Shock. That yeah, almost 80% of television is takes place in the mind of this boy named Tommy Westfall.
Interesting.
I
Yeah,
I
I
kind
do.
I kind of like to see another ending with that where they bring back that boy, but he's an adult, he's our age, but now he's a successful screenwriter.
Yeah, that would be great. I knew that ending of, and I knew the show, but I didn't know that they had a whole theory based on that reveal of that show. So that was
Yeah.
cool. But
Yeah.
getting back to this movie, how do you like Guillermo's buddy Ron Perlman showing up for his little
Oh,
role?
it would. The only way it would be more complete is if he brought in Doug Jones.
Uh huh.
but yeah, those are two of his production posse, um, Doug Jones and Ron Perlman, and I would say it was so weird not seeing him in some kind of prosthetic makeup because he is almost always in some kind of special effects makeup because Ron Perlman can really express emotion through all that makeup.
I
Like,
mean, yeah, most of his well-known roles, besides being Hellboy for Del Toro, the cult TV series Beauty and the
yes,
Beast, and then the
yes,
film that got him acclaim or recognizable, Quest for Fire. I mean, almost all of his roles, he's playing some sort of creature, monster, or just in heavy makeup.
yeah, but he is a hell of an actor with or without that makeup, and which goes on to his character, the kaiju black market, organs dealer.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, and that's another way that you know this shows how lived in this world is because after those kaiju are killed, you got to do something with that giant corpse.
Yep. And, them finding a kaiju brain is what helps them save the world because Charlie Day has come up with this theory that you can drift with the kaiju.
Yeah, he and almost by accident, I kind of wish they went further with that because that telepathic telepathic bond side effect from the drift, but it's but either way, it's all those characters, Charlie Day and Ron Perlman. Those characters are it. They're visually interesting. They are, um, es- well, I was going to say aesthetically, but that's the same word. But they're just plain interesting.
Yeah, and Ron Perlman showing up, even if it's a small role in a Del Toro movie, is much like you're waiting for Bruce Campbell to show up in a Sam Raimi movie somewhere. You're like, where's Ron Perlman gonna pop up here?
Yeah, Hannibal Chow. That's the character's name.
Uh
Yeah, talking about names that are memorable. Stocker Pentecost, Hannibal Chow.
huh. Yeah, I think he knew exactly what he was doing. And I remember when this came out, somebody was like, this movie feels cheesy. I'm like, oh, of course it's cheesy. It's a movie about giant robots fighting giant monsters. What did you want out of this movie?
Yeah, they can't. You can't take all these movies seriously. I mean, honestly, I would say movies like Batman v Superman are what happens when you take a movie too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to get on a Zack Snyder tangent,
Okay,
but I will say one thing and one thing only. I think that man fundamentally does not either get or like Superman.
agreed.
So that's my whole issue. I don't think he's a bad director, and I don't, I think it was unfair of what Warner Brothers did to him, but I don't think he was the right choice for that character.
I agree. Yeah, and let's leave it at that, unless until you decide to discuss the Zack Snyder movie. But going back to Del Toro, his um, it's like everything about his character, everything about a lot of the characters is interesting. Even though Raleigh Beckett, he would seem, yeah, he seems kind of flat, but even so, he's still interesting.
Yeah, there's an interesting art going on, even though on paper and even maybe watching it, you're like, well, he's just the flat milk toast male lead of the movie. But
Yeah,
yeah,
he's basically, the audience power fantasy. It's like that with that auto, and they think that automat being the hero automatically makes him interesting, and it doesn't. But Raleigh Beckett is still interesting because he's lived through it. He was gonna have a retirement, but then the kaiju war got worse, and they're just giving it one last go.
yeah, and I mean, he had walked away because he witnessed the death of his brother, and
He
that's
felt the
that's
death of his
you're
brother.
right.
Remember, they were
Yeah,
still they were still in the drift.
they were still linked up, and so that's a lot to deal with. And yeah, he was like, I'm done with this. And anyone that's had to deal with anything that scarring, like, not because I mean, you could take it to realistic. If you witnessed a loved one die in your presence, or you were in combat with a good friend and they died, like, you would want to walk away and
Ye-
not.
yes, yes, obviously, and all and and actually, that's what really brings it the human drama in between all the monster fights. Yes, we're here for the monster fights, but at the same time, it's uh, it's more about Raleigh, getting over the death of his brother. It's about Mako proving himself. It's about Stacker wanting to, keep humanity alive for as long as possible. It's about Charlie Day and Burn Gorman wanting to learn more about the kaiju and what makes them tick. Like everyone has a goal in this movie, and that's what I liked about it.
And that could be to the benefit of how well written the script is, and having a director like Del Toro that wants to put in those drives and those human connections and those what they need to do to, like you said, goals. They all have something they want to achieve or accomplish. They have something to prove. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is this is in the midst of, the Michael Bay Transformer franchise. This is in the midst of Legendary and Warner Brothers trying to do their own monster universe. And I think this movie exceeds far better than any of those movies do.
Well, yeah, because going back to Michael Bay, it's because of that human connection. I was discussing this with a friend of mine. She's a Transformers fan too, and we both watched Bumblebee. And one of the big things that made Bumblebee stand out, but between it and all of the Michael Bay movies, is that feeling of human connection. Um, if you actually watched that, not just watched that, but watched a lot of other Michael Bay movies, the characters really don't touch each other. Like there,
No,
there's no contact. There's no um, even in a sexual context, there's no intimacy uh, between that, and it's I think that's what its major failing is, and we as an audience cannot connect. Um, whereas um, whereas in Bumblebee, like when uh, Haley Steinfeld, I can't remember the character's name right now, but when like they touch each other, it really feels more like a Spielberg movie. It feels more like E.T. Um, like
that's what vibe.
It's definitely a Transformers movie. There's definitely Autobot versus Decepticon action, but there's also human connection. I Kind of going off on a tangent. That's I think that's one of the things that made Transformers really work. Uh, um, and especially the old G1 cartoon and the human sidekicks. and everything. Like of course, you ever watch you rewatch the G1 cartoon, you realize a lot of it can be really silly because there was an episode where three random Autobots do a rally race for charity because humanity knows the Transformers exist. It's like, oh hey, it's like they see a giant robot walking around. It's like, oh, hey, there's an Autobot. Or you see one of the Decepticons making deals with some, foreign dictator or something, or a mad scientist. Like they, um, there is a difference between treating a work with respect and taking that work seriously.
Yeah, and everything doesn't have to be taken seriously. And I imagine with that stuff going on in the Transformers cartoon is also because that was going on. Like, if you remember the G.I. Joe cartoon, there's always a lesson at the end of the episode, and
Yeah,
knowing's half
yeah.
the battle. So
Oh,
there's
yeah,
like
yeah.
educating children too at the same time as entertaining them.
Well, yeah, it can't be. Otherwise, it would be a 30-minute commercial for itself.
But I
But
think that's also what's missing from those American Godzilla and King Kong movies that have recently came out is like you don't care anything about those human characters at all in those movies.
yeah, I think that's what. Yeah, I agree. That is a major flaw. They think, oh, we're just here for the monster fights, and yeah, the monster fights might look awesome, but there's really not that all that much to them. And going back to Pacific Rim, yeah, that's what makes the human drama of all the characters work so well.
I
Like
agree.
like the interaction between Raleigh and Mako, and the interaction between Raleigh and Stacker, and the interaction between Stacker and Charlie Day. Like everyone has um, everyone has their different interactions, and there is uh, you can tell there's a relationship there.
Yeah, there's a relationship, there's history. Like we only see that opening scene after we get the prologue of Charlie Hunnam of Riley narrating how everything happened. So we don't
Yeah,
know all the history between him and Stacker, but we get it just with their interactions on screen that they have a history and like there's a respect, but also like Stacker can't stand that Riley is all instinct and doesn't follow protocol or rules, but he
he's a
still
maverick
respects him.
who only plays by his own rules, but I get the job done.
Yeah, this movie reminds me of two films, even though I think this movie has more character development, and that's Independence Day and Top Gun. Like I get a lot of Independence Day and Top Gun energy from this
Oh
movie.
yeah, there is that. Now that you mention, also that is another movie well, I wouldn't say recently, but only a few years ago did I sit down and watch this movie all the way through. Because I only watched paid attention to the dogfight scenes, and for a while I wanted to join the Air Force because of that, but I can't because.
Mhm.
But then, but yeah, there's uh, in Top Gun, there's a lot of macho posturing, and of course that homoerotic volleyball scene. uh, it's like this is for the ladies and some of the gay guys, but yeah, there is an interaction between characters. There is history between Michael Ironside and Tom Cruise, and and then Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, and then Tom Cruise and got
Anthony
goose.
Edwards.
Anthony
Yeah.
Edwards, yes, yes. But that's a testament to the chemistry, to the actor chemistry, and how well they work together. But it also shows us in the story how these characters interact. And yeah, Pacific Rim does that, and the Marvel movies definitely do that, especially with the TV shows. Um,
Hmm.
they've been playing with the characters, especially from, I want to say, phase two onward, for that. But yeah, um, they producers, I think producers only look at, uh, they're pretty short sighted. Like, all they want they want to make their money back. They want to make more money, and they think, oh, this movie has this, so let's put this in our movie, or this movie has this rating, so let's make all our movies this rating. But that's not it.
Well, perfect example of Hollywood or producers because I feel like so many producers aren't really on the creative side anymore. Not that old Hollywood producers were any better, but I feel like in the old Hollywood system, a lot of the producers still wanted to make good product, right? Even though it was a money making business. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I feel like with the corporatization of these studios, like they just look at, oh, well, this works. So like the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, whatever your opinion is of them, those were financially successful. So they're like, oh, well, we got to do this for everyone. Well, that doesn't work for every character. Just because that works for Batman doesn't mean it's going to work for another superhero or even another
yeah.
franchise. Like, it doesn't work. They're not all designed that way. It just happened to work for Batman because he can play in that universe and that world and that kind of story structure. It doesn't work for everybody.
No, no, and yeah, you're right that a lot of them don't seem to know what goes um, into a creative work, and uh, and don't really know the artistic side of making movies.
Yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Hollywood producers have never watched a movie in their life. Actually, I just
Yeah.
recently heard this one story about, there's a man who, owned, yeah, he was the secret owner of Marvel Comics, and he's never read a comic book in his life. But all um, he wanted the Marvel to make money and to show these, you know just oversaturated white guys as superheroes. And he was, apparently, they Kevin Feige had to work to take Marvel from him because he was leading it in, I honestly think, the wrong direction.
You know what's wild is I forget I want to say maybe it's Sony, but some movie studio had the opportunity to buy Marvel Comics when Marvel was bankrupt, which is how we got some of our first Marvel films before Feige
Yeah,
started it. And they turned it, they're like, no, we just want Spider Man. Nobody cares about these other superheroes. I bet they kick in there. But I'm glad that they have someone like Feige because Feige actually worked on a lot of those early Marvel films as a producer. And but he saw like they had some successes, but he saw where like it was going. Like they were just cranking forgettable movies and not doing anything interesting. So and
yeah.
not to get
No,
on the side fence, but I think that's what makes the Marvel movies so successful is like you mentioned, there is the character interaction and the relationships, and you actually care about they've made us care about characters that you probably would never think you'd care about based on just what they are in the comic books, but they've done it. And like you said, I think that's why this movie stands, Pacific Rim stands above other movies of its genre because there's more going on than what's the face value product of robots fighting monsters. Like just the character relationships. We know there's a history between Maiko, I'm probably saying that
Mako.
wrong. Mako and Stacker without even
Yes.
seeing it. We
Yeah.
know there's a history between Charlie Day and Bud Gordman without seeing it. Like this, their interactions, we know it. So before we get to ranking this movie, is there anything else you want to talk about or bring up?
I think we pretty much covered all of it and then some.
Yeah. So I try to create particular rankings for each director we do. So with Guillermo del Toro, because he is his worlds are very much, a lot of people, he is very much in the vein of monsters, because I think even in this movie there's a reference to Boris Karloff, or one of the movie monster actors, but he's also
Yeah.
fairy tale, so he's also in love with fairy tales and folklore. So if the
Hmm.
movie is absolutely one of your favorites, you think he just knocked it out of the park, I would say it's fantastical. But if you just enjoy it, you find it entertaining, because he loves the creatures and monsters so much, I call it a delightful creature feature. If you think it's a little more obscure, it's a cult following, it's only for fans or cinephiles, only a deep dive. If it's didn't quite hit up to snuff, it's a little mediocre. It's monsters over. He loved the monsters too much, and then because he's such a huge fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and because you see it almost in every monster design. If it's a horrible misfire, it's terrible. We say Cthulhu wrecks all.
No. I would definitely rank this as a creature feature.
Me too. I think it is exactly what it's meant to do. It's entertaining. It's a blast. I'm going to give it its own unique rating besides that though, because I remember hearing one guy, a critic, talk about movies, and he was talking about RoboCop, and he said there are great movies, there are good movies, there are terrible movies, but every once in a while there's a cool movie, and Pacific Rim is a cool movie.
Yeah. I think this one is, well, I mean, what, it came out 2013. It's almost 10 years old.
Hmm.
So it's, and people are still talking about it. This is going to be one of those movies that's gonna, stand the test of time.
Yeah, and
Like
I
it's
think
gonna be it like it'll be a long runner. Like um maybe not like maybe not cult like Hocus Pocus was for a cult for the kids, or I would say more, if it came out if it came out with those awesome special effects in, say, the 1980s, it probably would have been a top rental.
oh for sure this would be a massive cult film if it had come out in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
And I think there is a fan base for this movie, not just for Del Toro fans, but I think people who love Godzilla movies or people who love anime, this is like their jam.
Yeah, I've seen, but well, before COVID, I would see a lot of people cosplaying as Mako Mori on the convention circuit, um, and probably will be Pacific Rim cosplayers. I mean, cons are opening back up, and uh, I think we'll see. Um, a love of this continue, as well as people getting into it the first time, whatever age.
Hmm. And I think if you hit this at the right point, whether your age or your mood, it's like a kid in the candy store. And while is not up to snuff with some of his other films, I think there is merits here that you have brought up that make it stand above other films similar to it.
Yeah, I would. I mean, there are certain films, there are certain studios where even their worst movie is better than 80% of, what gets churned out.
Absolutely, and I think he's one of those filmmakers. Like even his weaker stuff is better than what a lot of other people's best work is.
Yeah, and that's because he loves what he does. There are directors out there. You can tell that they love what they do, and you can sometimes tell that, oh, I'm just kind of getting tired of this, but I got to take one more movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of filmmakers I feel like they reach that point. You either evolve, you retire, or you just keep trying to do the same thing over again and it's not working anymore.
Oh, uh, just an idea for a future episode. Now that Richard Donner is no longer with us, how about a retrospective of some of his movies? Because even though, yeah, he doesn't have that visual um, flair, or he doesn't have that kind of vision that Del Toro makes, I think he is a fantastic journeyman filmmaker.
He is, and if nothing else, he is responsible for creating the landscape we're in now in cinema because he directed the first Superman movie.
Oh yeah, he set the standard with Superman the movie. He set the standard with the original Lethal Weapon.
Yeah,
Uh,
we just talked about that last this week for Christmas, and I mean, it didn't create the buddy cop movie, but it made it huge. Like after that film came out, everyone was trying to replicate that formula.
yeah, and his and Shane Black's script, it was just the right combination of things to come out at the right time. And yeah, the original Lethal Weapon is still one of my cherished watches around Christmas time.
So before I let you go, I wanted to ask you two more questions because Del Toro has two movies coming out. He's got one that's coming out in a few weeks. Reviews have come in, most of them are positive. Have you seen or heard about his remake of Nightmare Alley? It's
I have
a
not, but I'll look it up as soon as we're done with this.
it's a film noir set around a carnival, and it's got a stacked cast: Bradley Cooper, Kate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Willem Dafoe, Ron Perlman, David Strahan, Richard Jenkins, Tony Collette. And this is his first film since winning his Oscar for Shape of Water.
Ooh, I'm I would have to say I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, it looks interesting. Of course, everything Del Toro does, even if you don't like his work, I don't think you can accuse the man of being boring.
No, absolutely not.
And sometime next year, he has a Netflix release of Pinocchio.
That is going to be very interesting because I still remember the original Disney Pinocchio, and they kept in a lot of the more disturbing scenes from the book, like children being turned into donkeys and essentially being sold into slavery.
Hmm.
I would like to see what Del Toro's take on that would be.
I'm going to imagine that he's going to keep the darker aspects of the original fairy tale, especially because he is such a stickler for like that method of storytelling. Like I think he prefers the Grimms and the folklore of where it originated, where it was more cautionary tale than what fairy tales have become in our Western society.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Um, and I actually kind of makes me wonder what the original book was like because it was written like how many years ago? Like it's it wasn't it's
Oof.
yeah. Let's
I don't know
see.
how old the text is. I mean, it's got to be at least from the 1800s,
Let's
I would
see.
think.
Oh, it's being made by um Walt Disney Pictures. So there may be some
Well, Robert Zemeckis is also doing one for Disney with Tom Hanks as Geppetto,
yeah, that's the one I'm looking at. Oh,
but Del
it will.
Toro's doing one.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's listed as both Guillermo del Toro and Robert Zemeckis. So
Yes, but
maybe
they're two separate versions.
okay. I it might not be yeah. Okay. It's they're just only talking about the Zemeckis version, but
Hmm.
I am. But let me. I was originally gonna look up the book. Yeah, Carlo Collodi. That is how it was written. Yeah, February 1883.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it had to be at least the 1800s. And
Yeah,
recently he announced that he is still trying to make At the Mountains of Madness, so he has not put that one to bed yet. And I
I
thought that I
I
thought he would take that on after he won the Oscar. But what do you think?
I think um say In the Mountains of Madness is going to be his Everest, really. It is the movie that it's like once he finally makes it says, "Yes, my life is complete."
Well, I just hope I, I I hope one of these streaming services is listening to him say this because I know they have the budget to give him to make this movie. And I just hope when he gets to make it that it lives up to his vision. Because I
I
know a lot of times when these directors make their passion project that took them decades to get made, it sometimes doesn't turn out as good as we thought it was going to be from what they had in their head.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of hope that well, they kind of did this with Lovecraft Country, but with adapting a Lovecraft work, I kind of hope Del Toro would address some of his blatant racism. Like if you've read a lot of um,
Hmm.
Lovecraft stories,
Yes.
the man made xenophobes look at him and say that's a bit much.
Yeah, he's very problematic. I mean, it's really hard to say if you're a Lovecraft fan or not based on those problems he was as an individual, but we can't deny that his writings has influenced and created so much of where horror is today. But
Oh yeah, of course, of course. Like he set the standard, but it's I say it's important to look at an artist's um yeah, what an artist's contributions as especially with while discussing their flaws. Like one of my music history professors, he called Richard Wagner the world's first Nazi.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a difficult thing to stomach, and we're still having to deal with it this day and age, finding horrible things out about people. Because unfortunately, you can be extremely talented and gifted at whatever your gift is as an individual, but that doesn't give you a pass if you're a horrible person in real life, just because you're really good at writing or acting or composing music.
yeah, and really that's a truth that needs to, you know, maintain. I've seen so many people just, you know, completely overlook the fact that yeah, some of their favorite artists are horrible, horrible people.
Yeah, so I think he would. I don't know if maybe just adapting that story he would, but I know if you like asked him he would because he's addressed those type of issues in his other films as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So,
I mean, Del Toro's Mexican, so
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So of course he would, which is um, also why I want to see The Shape of Water because it addresses that. I used to joke that it's the Abe Sapien origin movie, but
Well, it is kind of funny because it is Doug Jones playing another fishman, and
yes,
there's a little bit of a hint of that kind of love story in Hellboy too. But yes, if you have not seen The Shape of Water, I highly recommend it. It is a beautifully well made film, and it deserves all the praises it got when it came out.
yes. Oh, and since it's also that time before we check out, I just want to ask you something. Who is
Sure.
your who is your favorite Scrooge?
Oh Lord. God, there's so many Scrooges. I mean, you got to at least acknowledge Scrooge McDuck, right? He was a good
Of
Scrooge.
course,
Um, I guess I'm going to be a bit of ashamed here, and people can take my movie nerd card. I have never actually watched the 1951 version of Scrooge that many people say is the best version.
I don't
I
know about
know,
that, but
I know a lot of people love that. I'm gonna probably go just because I'm such a huge Muppet fan. I'm gonna go Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. Um, yeah, my personal favorite is, well, not absolute favorite, but my favorites is, it's like a three-way tie. Scrooge McDuck, um, Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart
Mm.
does a really good Scrooge. There's a TV movie version of A Christmas Carol, which is actually closer to the book
Oh,
than
cool.
other adaptations. And of course, Bill Murray.
Scrooged.
Yes, Bill. Yeah, that's another one of my favorite watches around Christmas time. Also directed by Richard Donner.
Yes, it was. Yes, yeah, that is a Richard Donner movie. And if you don't want to watch it, because we reviewed it because of who the star is, I understand. But there's a movie out called Fat Man that basically feels like the opening of Scrooged when they're doing that TV or movie with Lee Majors as the $6 million man,
Oh yeah, yeah. Who's in it?
Mel Gibson. But Walton Goggins is in it too, who's really good. But I understand. I
Yeah, I mean,
understand.
yeah. Well, I mean, I still watch the Lethal Weapon movies, but also because of Danny Glover. Um, I think he balances. It's like, because yeah, Mel Gibson's problematic, but also Danny Glover. He was a civil rights activist before he started acting. So
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's at least you have that side of the coin. Yeah,
yeah,
like I said, I understand. I'm not gonna blame anyone if they don't want to watch anything based on if it has a certain person involved or in the movie that's problematic. I get it. Uh,
yeah,
a lot of times for me, I'm like, I like the movie as it is. I hate that this person's in it, but it's a good movie.
yeah. That's how I'm kind of feeling about, the original Lethal Weapon, because yeah, because of Mel Gibson. And um, it honestly, to me, it's just sad, the road he went down now. Um, because I remember when Passion of the Christ came out, and living in East Texas, where churches were everywhere, people were flocking to see this movie.
Buses, buses.
Yeah, and then um, and then Gibson comes out as a traditionalist Catholic, and if you ever looked up what it goes beyond not recognizing the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah. And even the stuff with his dad, like his dad makes him look like a choir boy. Like the stuff his dad was involved in, believed in. It's messed up.
No, I'll have to look that up another time. Right, I'm in too good of a mood today uh, to like that. But it was really nice. Yeah, I was really looking forward to this to this talk.
Well, I'm glad you decided to come on the main show and talk it. I had a lot of fun and I liked all the things you brought up because you told me you had a lot of things to bring up and it was a fun discussion. And I always love when a guest can come on and contextualize and bring more to a movie than I thought was there. And you did that. And not that I didn't like this movie. I think this movie's a ton of fun, but you brought up a lot of things that I think make this movie as good as it is and that there's more on the there than what's on the surface.
All right, yeah, I'm glad to be there. If you ever want me as a guest on another show to discuss another movie, let me know.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're interested in our next two directors we're tackling because you did kind of throw some shade at the guy we're covering, but that's because he's kind of being old man yelling at a cloud right now.
Yeah.
But we're also doing the Coen brothers.
Uh, I'm I'm honestly neutral towards the movies. I've seen No Country for Old Men, and really I found the ending dissatisfying.
As
Uh,
a lot of people did. As a lot of people did. It's not this universally praised movie. But yeah,
but
we would love to have you on again for anything you want to talk about. Or if we have a director you like, let me
oh yeah,
know.
oh yeah. Well, we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. If people want to follow you on social media, if you don't want to mention that, you don't have to. But
Well, as you
if
can
they
see,
did,
my that's my ad on Instagram, In Bell Music. I am a musician. I am an educator. I talk about both on that, and you can also reach me on Twitter at Mr. Afro. It's
no.
Mr. underscore Afro. S- Um, and I pretty much give uh, my small opinions on on basically all of any kind of media that interests me. But I'm rarely on there because Twitter is kind of a cesspool.
That it is. That it is. It's not quite as bad as Facebook, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, um, I've but you can reach me on either of those two platforms.
Great. Nick, thanks again for coming on the show. I had a lot of fun. I didn't eat cereal while watching this, but it's okay. I think we brought enough energy and enthusiasm like we were on a sugar high.
Of course. All right.
Uh,
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks again. We're going to be back with Guillermo del Toro in the new year with Samantha Grace to talk Crimson Peak. We should have our Wes Anderson episode, Grand Budapest Hotel, next week. We had to postpone last night's episode due to guests' health. They weren't up to recording, so we should have that up next week. So, everybody have a safe and happy holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Bye.